This is Dr. Selina Wang. She is a professor at UC Davis who has devoted her career to studying edible oils. She just published a paper analyzing which oils are really in your food. Spoiler alert, just because the package says it's avocado oil doesn't mean it is. The reason I'm filming you this way is because people are going to say this was an AI-generated video.
This was not.
It was not an AI-generated video. I attended a talk she gave here at Stanford to a group of nutrition scientists, and she lit up the room.
A lot of these phenolics you can actually taste, right? When you eat these black ripe olives, I hope there's no black ripe olive processors in the audience. If you taste these, they don't have much flavor other than they taste a little bit like the cans that they came coming with, right?
So we traveled to UC Davis to ask her about all the things: the type, the texture, oxidation, inflammation, storage, the smoke point. I hope you don't mind, but it took so long to set up, I'm starving. So I'm gonna have a snack, okay?
Yeah.
It's fried in avocado oil, so I'm good, right?
How does it taste? Taste good? I hope so.
Tell me about this frying in avocado oil. Does that make me safe?
Well, it's still ultra-processed foods.
Yes.
It's still designed to be hyper-palatable, which makes it hard to stop eating.
Yeah.
That's why you got a handful over there.
Yeah. Avocado oil. I heard some scientist published a paper a couple of years ago saying most avocado oil is diluted with some other kind of oils.
Yeah.
Who wrote that paper?
That was me and my research group.
The headlines in that paper were kind of extraordinary.
Yeah, we went to the local grocery store and collected avocado oil just like any consumers would. And then we took them to the lab, did some chemical analysis, and we found that majority of them were either rancid, meaning
Rancid.
meaning the oil has gone stale, oxidized, or in some cases they were blended with lower value oil such as soybean, canola, Linoleic sunflower oil, Linoleic safflower oil. That's what we found.
So they're allowed to put on the label avocado oil, even though, is there some percentage it has to be called avocado oil?
Currently, there are no standards.
So it could be 1%.
It could be 1% or 0. In a couple cases, the oil on the label, it says extra virgin avocado oil.
Oh, really?
When we did analysis in the lab, it turned out to be 100% refined soybean oil. So it wasn't extra virgin.
Wow.
Also wasn't avocado oil.
And what does extra virgin mean?
Extra virgin is the highest quality grade of cold pressed, unrefined oil. So basically the oil has gone through mechanical extraction with no added heat or solvent. It's kind of like how you make fruit juice, right? You squeeze to get the juice out of it. You squeeze olives and then you get extra virgin, or you get virgin olive oil, but the highest grade is called extra virgin.
Maybe we better switch to another food. So these are all peas, right? So we can munch on some peas. Have you had these?
That's right. Yeah, my kids love them.
They're pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
A little bit refined. They're not the pea pods you think they are. They're extruded. And they're 70% peas and 30% rice. And I think they're ground pretty fine. They're salted. They got oil in them. They say on the oil it's either canola, safflower, or sunflower oil. So how do you know which it is? You don't, right?
You don't.
You don't. And does it make a difference?
Well, canola oil, safflower oil, they have different fatty acid profile, right? So that makes it different, but we don't know how much of each. And at the end of the day, no one should be eating this at a huge amount where it becomes our main source of fat.
Processed food. How come we haven't been offering Penny anything?
That's right.
This is my granddaughter, and I gave her one. How generous am I?
You give her ultra-processed foods.
I know. It's terrible. I'm going to get in trouble. I better set these down. So, bitchin' sauce. That stuff's good. Have you had that?
Yes, I have.
So the first ingredient is expeller pressed, and it depends on whether you buy it at Costco in the big containers, then it's sunflower seed oil, but this one is grapeseed oil. So expeller pressed, what does that mean?
It means it's a extraction process that's using a screw press.
Squeezing.
Yeah, to get the oil out instead of using solvent to extract.
But they use some heat, right?
During the processing or the extraction, there's friction. So heat is created during that process. So it's not cold pressed because there's some heat that's generated. Ooh.
Isn't that good?
Mm-hmm.
So sunflower, a little bit of heat, expeller pressed, almonds, spices, not too much sodium.
But one thing to keep in mind though, expeller press is a process to extract the oil.
Yeah, from the seed.
And they're still subject to the same refining process. Like solvent extracted oil still, it all goes through the refining process to remove undesirable flavors, oxidation products, impurities. So even if it's expeller press, it's still a refined product.
So hexane is a common solvent they use.
Yes.
So am I eating a lot of hexane?
No, of course not.
Why not?
Hexane has very low boiling point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's around 155 Fahrenheit. So during refining, which is a much higher temperature than that, or even home cooking, which is higher temperature than that too, it's evaporated off.
So there's trace amounts left.
And yeah, so Prop 65 actually has a maximum allowable limit for hexane, and it's 28 milligrams per day.
Wow.
And if we look at how much is it in the oil, so far, none of the studies have shown that it has more than 1 milligram per kilo grains of oil. So to reach 28 milligrams,
You have to go to the gas station and fill up your car with gasoline.
28 kilos of oil.
Yeah.
So what we really need to worry about, is the environmental exposure for factory workers. When you're getting gasoline, the exposure of that is much, much greater.
How much greater? 100x or 1000x or something like that?
Yeah.
It's in a different universe.
Yes.
Yeah, fascinating. And what is bleaching?
Bleaching is a process to remove pigment. So you can see refined oil tend to have lighter color and an impurity. It's not like we're dumping bleach into the oil.
Right.
It's an absorption process to remove those impurities that's in the oil.
Bleaching sounds terrible.
It sounds bad.
You know, I love scientists. They're my heroes. You're one of them. But scientists really suck at naming.
Yes,
How could they name it bleaching?
that's right.
There's no bleach. No bleach was harmed in this process, right?
Yeah, I guess they use bleaching clay. That's what's called the technical term.
Yeah.
Scientists tend to want to be as accurate as possible,
I see.
not focusing on how the consumers or general public may react to those terms.
How does bleaching clay work?
It's basically just a process that absorb these pigments, like I said, oxidation products and impurities.
But not using bleach. They're not pouring bleach on clay.
Even though I think when consumers hear the word bleaching, that's probably the mental image that they have.
It's like drinking bleach to cure COVID or something. No wonder they hate seed oils so much.
Yeah.
So looking at Amazon yesterday, there were a lot of best-selling books on seed oils.
By Dr. Kate.
Kate Shanahan has got, I don't know how many reviews and ratings and everything else. And she named the Hateful Eight seed oils as just being terrible, toxic, and everything else. What's the scientific consensus on that?
I think the science is pretty clear. Decades of research has shown polyunsaturated fatty acids, which is what's in the seed oil, correlate with better cardiovascular health markers. I can't understate how consistent the science has been on this.
But Kate says they're inflammatory.
That's not what the science shows.
Aren't there like 12 well-controlled randomized trials showing there's no inflammatory nature?
Yeah.
But I'm worried about the French because one of her hateful eights was grapeseed oil. And isn't that their preferred oil? Why do they like grapeseed oil so much?
So grapeseed oil is a byproduct from winemaking. Essentially, you either solvent extract or you expeller press to get the oil of the grapeseed. So it's in a place where they have a lot of those. That makes sense.
And also, it doesn't have a neutral taste, and the French are so nuanced about their preparation of food. So are they just walking heart attacks waiting to happen because they're eating grapeseed oil, or what's the deal?
No, grapeseed oil is high in polyunsaturated fats.
But it's on the Hateful Eight, and that book is selling like crazy.
Yeah, I think they have really good marketing. Hateful Eight sounds...
There seems to be something about So in the law, there's this strategy well known among personal injury lawyers, which is the reptile strategy. And it's how to strike fear in the reptilian brain for juries to bypass the logical part of the brain. That's the whole intent. And feels like that's what's going on with the Hateful Eight. It's a reptile brain kind of strategy.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be really mad at me watching this.
Well, scientists don't come out and say, this food is poison, or this food is a superfood.
Yeah.
Scientists don't speak that way.
Yeah.
We will say we have found some markers that correlate with positive health outcomes, because it's never an isolated case where we're looking at one compound at a time, right? We're consuming the food. Yeah. And when someone says, this is poison, that's a red flag.
That's the reptile strategy.
Yes, that research has shown is potentially it's a neurotoxin that we need to watch out for.
I see. I don't know a sharper divide in nutrition than the debate over seed oils. Every nutrition scientist I'm aware of, like Selina, believes oils are healthy. But millions of people believe they're poison, including some smart doctors.
But here's what you don't cook with: any seed oils for sure, absolutely not. Vegetable and canola oil.
Seed oils are quite possibly an even more significant cause of modern disease than are carbohydrates and sugars.
I wanted to understand how it was possible that two groups of smart people could hold such polar opposite beliefs. So I read Catherine Shanahan's best-selling book, Dark Calories. Oh my gosh, this book is persuasive. I can't blame anyone who doesn't have a background in nutrition science who comes away after reading this book thinking seed oils are the devil. For one thing, it makes 100% intuitive sense. Seed oils are processed. The fiber and protein are stripped. They're sometimes processed at high temperatures and with chemicals. Some of the color and nutrients are stripped out. I, for one, have never been able to understand how healthy calories can come from that. For another, she explains how unsaturated fats are more easily oxidized than saturated fat and how oxidation could cause inflammation. But I think 80% of the divide can be explained by one thing. Catherine is focused on mechanisms and nutrition scientists are focused on outcomes. For example, Joe Rogan gets millions of views by talking about how oils are made.
Please explain, though, the process, because it's so vile.
It's insane. And so to degum it, you use something called hexane. And hexane, if you go to National Institute of Health or National Library of Medicine, you'll see that that is a known neurotoxin. And you heat it to 405 degrees, which turns it rancid.
But that is focused on mechanisms. He's using his intuition to guess what the result of that processing is on human health. Once we understand why chemists process oil the way they do, it makes so much more sense. For example, the oil is heated in a vacuum. That causes plant matter to be sucked out of the oil, stuff that would oxidize in time if it were left in the oil. Most of that stuff has complicated names only a chemist can understand, like aldehydes and peroxides. They are considered impurities. But here's the thing. Chemists are making sure there is no oxygen in the vacuum chamber when the oil is heated. So it can't oxidize, just like you can't start a fire in a room that doesn't have oxygen. That's a whole different thing than adding potatoes to oil at McDonald's and jacking up the temperature in the presence of oxygen. And this is why it's a good thing chemists design the process and check the final product for safety, not Joe Rogan. When Catherine talks mechanisms, she uses really scary emotional language.
During episodes of oxidative stress, free radicals fly everywhere, shattering enzymes, mutating genes. It's a kind of toxic chaos that portends potential Armageddon for a cell.
So what does she say about the boring randomized trials that actually test to see if oils create Armageddon in our cells? She doesn't mention them. Every nutrition scientist in the world can tell you about those trials. There are dozens of them over decades from around the world. But no mention in the book. I am sorry, but I think that's just bad faith. Speaking of bad faith,
The story of how vegetable oil became a staple in our diets doesn't begin with hunters in a forest or farmers in a field. like that of other substances we consider food. It begins with chemists in a soap factory.
120 years ago, humans did not eat seed oils.
Surely I can't be the only one who loves food history. These are just some of the books in my library about food history, and most were reasonably popular. Food, a history of the world in 6 glasses, food in history. One of the most interesting is Ken Albala's book, which is a translation of ancient recipes into English. Rhea Tannehill's bestseller got rave reviews for being historically accurate. She wrote, "Oils were everywhere, in demand in the ancient world for cooking, lighting, and medicine." The olive was by no means the only provider, of course. In Greece, oils were also extracted from the walnut and the opium poppy. In Mesopotamia and Africa, from sesame. From almonds in Anatolia, flax and radish seeds in Egypt, flax and camelline in Northern Europe. In America, there were groundnut, maize, and sunflower seed oils, while in Asia, the soybean and the coconut palm were among the early sources. The only thing that's changed is science has figured out new ways, safer ways, to extract oils from new kinds of seeds, like canola oil. Would it surprise you to learn that scientists who studied oils for years in countries that are much healthier than the US, like most European countries and Canada, explicitly recommend canola oil in their dietary guidelines? But there are some studies showing that oxidized oils do cause bad health, like cardiovascular and liver diseases. And it would be bad faith of me to not mention those studies. Those studies are performed on animals because it's considered unethical to perform them on humans, since oxidized oils are known to be harmful. Why do I get the feeling that humans got all the votes in that decision and not the animals? But I forgot to ask Selina about rancid oils when we were with her. So the thing I forgot to ask you about was rancidity. These studies that show that rancid oils are actually not healthy. What is the difference between oxidation and rancidity?
Oxidation or oxidized refer to a chemical reaction with oxygen. Rancidity really is what you would experience at the end of fat oxidation. It's a off smell and taste. I would also say a caveat in these, human trials. A lot of times the oil quality is not tested.
And yet those studies still came out healthy. What does that say? Does that say that there just isn't that much rancid oil around? Or
Maybe in some of those studies, the oil is not as fresh as the oil in other studies, but very consistently, research shows that polyunsaturated fat would result in positive health outcomes in comparison to saturated fats.
But there are these studies on animals that are not considered ethical to do on humans, where they take known oxidized oils and they feed them to the animals, and then the animals get liver disease and cardiovascular disease. Is that not true?
I've seen a couple of those studies. As far as I know, there's no long-term human health studies. All of us have consumed oxidized oils, or oils in the restaurants, right? It's likely oxidized. If you go to a restaurant where they're reusing the oil over and over, that oil is likely oxidized.
Are oxidized compounds words I don't know the meaning of, like aldehydes and peroxides and things that only chemists understand?
Yes. The aldehydes are actually the compounds that you're smelling when you're experiencing rancidity.
And those predispose the oil to lower shelf life because they're kind of oxidation products already. And
Yes.
so the heating in a vacuum removes those things, making the oil more stable, right? So we ought to, isn't that a good thing, not a bad thing?
It's a good thing. In fact, refining remove oxidized compounds. You reduce the oxidation of the oils. There's also part of the refining process that neutralize the free fatty acids that's in the oil.
Yeah.
Free fatty acids are pro-oxidants, meaning they make oxidation happen faster, and refining removes the free fatty acids.
I think that's what Kate was seeing when she wrote this in her book.
All 8 of these oils are far cheaper to produce than animal fats and don't require refrigeration to reduce spoilage the way lard and butter do.
I edited that Zoom session down from a much longer conversation, and I wouldn't want my edit to give the impression that Selina's okay with oxidized oils. In fact, this conversation broke out.
And then it's not just from oil, right? You know, have you had stale nuts? Walnuts go rancid super quick, right?
Oh,
You know,
I didn't know that.
yeah, they kind of become soft, and then it has this stale
Yeah.
smell.
Yeah, all my nuts are in the freezer.
Yeah, Chris, you never had stale nuts?
Well,
Maybe
So I
he's
was
never
just-
had fresh nuts.
well, we buy in bulk, so I'm a little worried now.
Well, where do you put them? Do you put them in the freezer like Michelle?
No. I don't know as much as Michelle does
They
about
should
this
be
stuff.
in your freezer. They will go bad.
I didn't know that. But scientists do say this.
Yeah.
That's kind of an extraordinary chart.
Yes.
I mean, published about 10 years ago. Absolutely extraordinary because it's comparing carbohydrate consumption as, you know, the Nurses' Health Study, people normally consume it, 75% of it's refined. The mortality from an equal amount of calories from carbohydrate compared to the different types of oils. The thing I didn't see coming, did you see this coming? That polyunsaturated oils would have such a huge drop in the risk of mortality?
Mm-hmm. What do the anti-seed oil people say about this?
They bail on watching my episodes and go to some other episode.
It's pretty clear what research has shown. Some of these studies have been going on for 20, 30 years, hundreds of thousands of people being involved in the study, and it's incredibly consistent.
Yeah, amazing. But here's the thing, the people who are concerned about seed oils have a legitimate concern, which is the processing of the seed oil does strip out things that you find in olive oil, the polyphenols and all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming that the monosaturated line is mostly olive oil, and it has polyphenols and so on, and those are good for you. And yet the polyunsaturated oils, which I'm assuming are like soybean oil and corn oil, highly refined, stripped of a lot of the nutrients, they're still, in terms of mortality, beating out the olive oil. Is it just because of lowering the LDL, or do we really know?
I don't know if the mechanism of that is well understood, but what we know is polyunsaturated fats, especially when you're using that instead of saturated fats, correlate with long-term positive outcome. Right. And most of the oils, they're somewhere between those lines, right? Mm-hmm. They're a combination of polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, saturated fats, but in different ratios.
You scientists have to complicate everything. This was created by the PR department or the publishing department of Harvard, but you scientists have to go wreck it all and make it like that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't even know if the camera can capture all that. But like, where's canola oil? Would you call canola oil a polyunsaturated oil or a monosaturated oil?
Yeah, so canola oil is an interesting one. It was bred from rapeseed oil in the 1970s to have a favorable balance of fatty acid profile.
Yeah.
And then it shows, right?
Yeah.
It's high in monounsaturated fats, but you also have some omega-3, which is known to be anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
And that's how canola oil came about.
How did it come up with a 2-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3? That's kind of extraordinary among the oils, right?
It is.
Flaxseed is obviously better, but it has a lower smoke point. Canola oil smoke point is 400 or something like that? You're smiling.
Because smoke point is not an indicator of oxidative stability.
I was going to ask you about that. What's the difference between smoke point and oxidation?
Smoke point is exactly what it sounds. It's the temperature in which the oil starting to smoke.
You start to see it smoke on your stove.
Yeah, you could do the test at home yourself. But oxidative stability is much more complicated. That's why people don't talk about oxidative stability the way they talk about smoke point. Smoke point is easy to communicate, give you a number. Oxidative stability has a lot to do with the fatty acid profile, like you've shown here. Right? So it's different for different oil. The freshness of the oil. If the oil is less fresh, it's going to have a lower smoke point. Has to do with phenolics, the antioxidants. So if an oil has more antioxidants, like extra virgin olive oil, then you will have higher oil stability because the antioxidants in itself help to combat oxidation.
So I should say a few things about this chart. Number one, it's from the Harvard Nurses and Health Professionals studies. They had a pretty good handle on the broad categories of fat they were consuming, but they had no idea on rancidity. My guess is if you pay attention to consuming fresh oils and storing them carefully, you can get even better results. Number two, these dramatic results came from substituting just 5% of calories from mostly refined carbohydrates with oils. From the shape of the lines, it looks like substituting even more would produce even more dramatic results. Maybe up to 10%, I don't know. Number three, the authors pointed out this was total mortality, including death from Alzheimer's. Polyunsaturated fats were particularly effective at reducing the risk of Alzheimer's. Number four, your mileage may vary. I just had my DNA sequenced. That's the next episode. And I won the jackpot for most of the biggest risks. For example, I have 5 times the risk of Alzheimer's for men of European descent. And that doesn't count the time I got knocked unconscious with a fractured skull and had to be lifelined to Stanford in a helicopter. With my risk factors, it makes sense to focus on the lower line, polyunsaturated fats. Number 5, the internet is outraged at the avocado oil fraud that Selina just exposed.
Do not buy a single avocado oil product again until you see this video and the study that just came out from UC Davis.
These, I always pay the $7.99 for these because they're healthier. UC Davis did a study that says 89% they have other oils mixed in there with that. Well, joke's on us.
I know, fraud is fraud, food companies lie, and it makes me scream too. Think of all the videos people made about the miraculous changes they saw when they abandoned seed oils for avocado oil, not knowing that they were actually eating seed oils.
You stop eating seed oils and you stop wearing sunglasses and wait a month or two, I don't care how white you are, you will tan.
But ironically, less expensive oils they used, like soybean, fall on this lower line. So, contrary to what the internet believes about seed oils, it's probably a healthy substitution. So olive oil is everyone's favorite oil, and it always gets a pass on all the oil wars. And my granddaughter Penny has some questions about that.
So my grandpa buys his olive oil in opaque glass bottles and cans. Why do you think he does that?
I think is to make sure he buys oil that's fresh and not oxidized. Dark glass is a protective packaging for oil to prevent the light getting to it, oxygen getting to it, so that the oil can stay as fresh as it can.
And then why do the oils make us cough?
That's a good question. So there's a compound, a molecule called oleocanthal. It's unique in extra virgin olive oil, and it has a similar property as ibuprofen. It's an anti-inflammatory compound. If you ever taken ibuprofen and then you have it stuck in your throat, it has the feeling in the back of your throat, kind of what we call a pungency. It tickles your throat a little, and then it make you cough. So that's the reason.
So what's a two-cough oil, and why would anybody buy that?
Some professional tasters, they would judge an oil. They would joke around and then say, this oil makes me cough 1 time. This oil makes me cough 2 times, 3 times. It's a way to say how robust this oil is. It's like when you first start drinking coffee, and then you drink coffee with a lot of milk and sugar. And then as you start drinking more and more, it becomes, you just drink it black without less milk and sugar. So the more extra virgin olive oil you have, probably the more robust that you prefer. So maybe your grandpa have had a lot of good extra virgin olive oil and then prefer extra virgin olive oil with a little bit more oomph to it.
That one that says rich and robust, that one was a 3-cough oil for me.
Oh.
So it's California.
Yeah, so speaking of that, why do you insist on buying California olive oils instead of like other states' oil?
Because he watched your seminar.
Yeah, I say buy local, buy fresh. You know, if you're traveling in Italy, you probably have really fresh olive oil. Olive oil is best wherever you are. We're so lucky to be in California, where 99% of olive oil is produced in this country. It's the freshest that we can get.
But you also made a point about some enforcement, like there's inspections and enforcement in California when they say extra virgin in California, olive oil and all that, and there isn't in the other states, is that right?
California is the only state that has a mandatory quality standard. I helped to draft that standard in 2014. California producers who make more than 5,000 gallons every year are subject to the mandatory testing program. That means there's quality standards that they need to meet in order to call their oil extra virgin.
Yeah, so you said extra virgin olive oil doesn't stay extra virgin. What do you mean by that?
So extra virgin is the highest grade, but that changes with time. Oil is never as good as, it's not like wine, it doesn't age well. So it's not going to stay fresh, and after time or exposed to temperature or light, you will become oxidized, and then you will no longer meet the extra virgin grade standards.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you can do to keep it extra virgin?
Yeah, you can keep it away from light temperature and consume it as fast as you can. If you live by yourself and you don't cook a lot, I would not recommend buying a huge bottle and have it for a year or two. Also, if you have good oil, you should use it up. Don't save it for special occasions, again, because the oil is not going to get better.
Mm-hmm. And then why does some olive oil look more green than other?
There are different varieties. Some varieties tend to be greener than others, and it's from a pigment called chlorophyll. And also earlier harvests, extra virgin olive oil would have more chlorophyll, so they tend to be greener.
Mm-hmm. And then what are like all the flavors with names like Arbequina and stuff like that?
There are different varieties. Arbequina, Koroniki, Picual, Albersana, these are all different varieties of olives, and then they have different flavor profile associated with them.
So what temperature should we store olive oil at?
If you're going to use it in a month, just room temperature in the cupboard, I wouldn't put it next to your stove. And if you have an oil, and this is not just to olive oil, any oil, really what we're trying to do is to keep them away from oxidation. So if it's an oil that you're planning on keeping for a while, you can store in the fridge. Keeping in mind for olive oils, parts of it may become solidified, and then it may be too much trouble to take it in and out of the fridge all the time. But if you have 2 bottles of your favorite oil, you can have one and then use it as fast as you can while the other one is stored in the refrigerator.
Okay.
And it becomes cloudy in the refrigerator because it's monosaturated. The polyunsaturated ones don't do that.
Right.
Same as in your arteries, maybe.
Debatable.
Debatable. Good job, Penny. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. How are the chips, Tony?
Oh, they're delicious. I love these things.
Do they taste like avocados?
No.
There's no way you can tell, right?
No, I
No
can't.
way.
Wow.
They taste great.
They do taste great. And I think that's it, right? We should, we're eating it for pleasure. We shouldn't fool ourselves to think that it's good for our health. In some ways, I think for a consumer, you will probably eat more because you think it's not as harmful to me.
Right.
Comparing to soybean oil.
That's deceptive.
Yeah. And it costs more.
We try to avoid coconut oil.
Because it's full of saturated fat.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad the whole coconut oil craze has kind of died down.
Yeah.
Some people think that's what will happen to avocado oil. I don't think it will.
I do have a question for you. This one says Greek extra virgin olive oil, and the other two say just extra virgin. What's the difference?
Oh, just because it's from Greek.
Is it going to taste any different?
We should see.
Yeah.
Although this one, wait, Chrissy, you just ordered this?
Yeah.
This oil was harvested 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
So one of the things to look for is the harvest date, right? So this oil, what we want to get is harvest date by November 2025, because that's the most recent harvest. Mm-hmm. This was harvested a year before that. So that should tell you a little bit about the freshness of the oil.
Then that one is also hand-picked and cold extracted. Does that also make a difference? No, you just say it to be fancy.
No, because they're all cold extracted. And this one doesn't have the harvest date. You can go by the best before date, but the best before date, it doesn't really tell you much because usually it's 2 years from bottling date, which could be years from harvest date, depending on the producer. You know, before this whole seed oil thing, it's just edible oil or vegetable oil. There was never a term seed oil.
All right, I got a tough question for you that I have to ask.
Okay.
Are you funded by the olive oil interests and that's why you promote it?
They don't fund me personally. They do support research for my research group. We do receive funding from Olive Oil Commission of California, which is a government entity of California, as we help to develop quality standards, the monitoring program, and research that's going on to ensure that we have the best quality of olive oil in California.
So what does the money go for? Do you help them determine how to breed the olives? Anything about olive trees, harvesting, any of that stuff?
All of that.
Because you're an agricultural school.
You're right. And the money goes to graduate student tuitions and their stipend, and it covers from the orchard to processing to chemical standards and packaging.
I see.
All that.
So talk about the harvest time, because I think you said in one of your seminars, it's a lot easier to harvest when they're black and they fall on the ground.
Yeah, when the fruits are less mature, they tend to want to stick to the trees a little bit more, so it's harder to get them off the trees. But that's when the antioxidants are higher, there's more phenolics, right? And to maximize the health benefits, we want to go with the early harvest olives. But that's also when the oil content is a little lower, so the yield is lower. So for producers, they're not able to make as much money versus when you harvest really late, the fruits come off the tree easily, the oil content is higher, but the phenolics and the antioxidant contents are lower.
So this is why you participated in enforcement and inspection standards and everything?
California tend to harvest a little
earlier,
a few months earlier than some other traditional producing countries. This one though says it's a Greek oil, but it does say early harvest.
So this one is from Morocco. And right on the label it says low in acidity, 0.1 to 0.2. Do I get points for buying a lower acidity oil, or does it matter?
So lower acidity, it's not like sour tasting. So first of all, that's different. All it means is that they harvested from fruit that has not started breaking down yet. So free acidity is correlated to the health of olives. This number doesn't change during storage. So the international olive oil standard for extra virgin olive oil, the free fatty acidity cannot be higher than 0.8%. In California, the standard is at 0.5%.
So they have some other things here. Peroxide valve, less than 10.
So peroxide value increases.
It says valve, V-A-L-V-E.
I think they meant value. It's peroxide value, or peroxide is a primary oxidation product. When the oils start to oxidize, you will see an increase in peroxides. That number changes with time. So when you're putting it here, suggesting that that number doesn't change, that's problematic.
I have a question. I was wondering about containers, because you see olive oil in all kinds of containers, everything from metal to bottles to probably plastic. What kind of container do you think is the best?
I really like oil that's in a bag-in-box. Have you seen those?
No.
But you know box wine, so they're in a cardboard box. I like that for olive oil because one of the issues is that once the cap is open, oxygen could get into it. But when you have this system, it's bagging box, basically you push a button for the oil to come out each time. So there's no way for the oxygen to get into it. And then it's in a cardboard box that protects it from light. We don't see that a lot in retail, so for consumers it's harder to get, although you could find them online, and they're very common in food service, so in restaurants. So that's a really good packaging. I also like these tin cans. That's also protective, and then they're lighter to carry, and you don't have to worry about breaking.
So another question, RFK Jr. went to Shake and Bake. What is it called?
Shake and Bake.
Shake and, steak and shake.
Shake and bake is
You can tell where I don't shop.
where you don't go, yeah.
He went to Steak and Shake and he ate fries cooked in tallow. Was it really tallow? 100% tallow?
It's possible, though tallow is pretty expensive. It's much more expensive than vegetable oil. So one of worries that I would have is how often is that oil swap gets changed? Because one of the concerns about oxidation is the repeated use of the oil.
And that applies to tallow too?
That applies to all oils. Tallow has lower polyunsaturated fats, so oxidative stability-wise, it's more stable because saturated fats is more stable, but still.
Yeah. But you said in a Stanford talk that those fries that they were eating, that they sell, were actually pre-cooked.
Correct, in vegetable oil.
And then heated up in
tallow.
In tallow. So what percentage do you think is, we don't know, I guess.
I have to test it.
Oh, you'll test them if I send you some fries?
Yeah, we can extract the oil out of them, do fatty acids.
Make a note, Michelle, let's buy some Steak and Shake.
All right.
What do you pour on your salad and what do you eat?
Extra virgin olive oil.
Extra virgin, why do you do that?
First of all, it tastes delicious.
Tastes good, yeah.
We're in California. We have access to local and fresh oil. And if I'm going to bake with it, I would go with canola oil, refined avocado oil because they're neutral and mild in flavor.
So let's do the testing. We'll put Michelle here.
There was research down here and it found majority of consumers like Rancid oil because it tastes familiar to them. Because we all grew up with really bad, including myself, when I first started doing research on this. And then I was shocked by what a good oil actually tastes like, because that was not what I was familiar with.
All right, those are the oils we're tasting from you.
Ready?
Should I open my eyes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So remember, color is not an indicator of oil quality. That's why professionals, they put the oil in these blue glass cups so you cannot see the color. Some positive attributes. So what you're looking for is fruity. So olive is a fruit, right? So you should have some fruitiness when you smell. Some people have really good sense of smell, and then they will say they can smell bananas, tomato leaves, stone fruit. You know, they can be artichoke. And it also should be kind of grassy, herbaceous. It should be fresh. Those are the positive aroma that we're looking for. So these are designed to fit really well in the palm of your hand, right? So it holds nice, and then you cover the top to trap the flavor molecules. Have you had cheese? You know that a room temperature cheese has more flavor compared to cheese that you've just taken out of the refrigerator, for example. You want to bring this to room temperature to bring up the aroma. When you're ready, we'll take a big sniff. What do you smell?
It was so brief, but it definitely smells like olives and a little grassy.
Yeah.
Do you smell olives?
A little bit, not much.
Okay. And then when you're ready, we're going to take a sip. And sometimes people do this kind of sucking motion to get some oxygen in there to aerate the molecules.
I will spare you the details on which oils we liked and why. We also tested my oils. Long process. As usual, the interview went on much longer than what I've included here, so I'll touch on a few of the things that I threw overboard. One is I braced her that half our viewers are American, so she's going to take a beating in the comments section. That happens to every scientist we host. It's just part of American culture now. Here's part of her response.
But I think there's also a general distrust about food companies, food processing, and maybe also science.
In America.
In America. Because when I go to conferences, my international colleagues are very confused.
Yeah, they don't understand what's happening.
They don't understand what's happening when we are reopening these conversations about trans fats or edible oils. Here we are.
I didn't include all of the oil chemistry and regulation stuff. I thought the episode was getting too complicated and too long. Here's Selina's bottom line from the entire episode.
What really matters at the end of the day is a balanced diet. I think we have lost sight of moderation.
Yeah, and eating a wide variety of foods.
Let's say you're cooking with canola oil for your stir-fried vegetable. That's different from eating a lot of ultra-processed foods that has the same amount of canola oil.
So that speaks to correlation versus causation. It's true that we consume a lot of seed oils in foods like donuts, guilt by association. Whenever I host an epidemiologist from Harvard, someone who spent 12 years of rigorous training about causation versus correlation and handling confounders, we get a dozen comments informing me and the scientist that correlation is not causation. I'll leave you with one final thought. If someone is passionate enough to write a book warning you about seed oils, ask yourself, why didn't they write it alongside a chemist or an epidemiologist who actually runs human dietary trials? I think it's because no qualified lipid scientist like Selina would put their name on that book.